In our headlines on this Wednesday, May 7th, here in South Korea. We are counting down 27 days to the presidential election on June 3rd, and the Conservative Party is embroiled in internal conflict over a possible merger, while the Liberal Party seeks to downplay the legal battles facing its candidate. Meanwhile, a ruling by a court in the Czech Republic puts the brakes on the sealing of a nuclear power deal between South Korea and the Czech Republic that was scheduled to take place this week. And India strikes several parts of Pakistan as tensions flare following a deadly assault late April against Hindu tourists in Kashmir, during which gunmen shot to death at least 26 people. Presidential candidates Kim Moon-soo and Han Duck-soo are scheduled to sit down on this Wednesday evening for talks on a possible merger, while a legal huddle appears to have been moved aside for contender Lee Jae-myung. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
The Seoul High Court has accepted Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung's request to delay his election law trial, removing a key legal hurdle for the campaign that could have even blocked his run. Tuesday's decision pushes the hearing to after the June 3rd presidential election, saying it was to guarantee a fair election campaign opportunity to the presidential candidate and to eliminate controversies over fairness. He welcomed the news while he was on his listening tour, part of his preliminary campaign tour in Jeollabuk-do province.
This is a critical time when the people are practically exercising their sovereignty. So it's extremely important to ensure nothing hinders that process. I believe the court made a rightful and necessary decision in line with the spirit of the Constitution.
As for his listening tour, he's set to wrap up the day in Chungcheongnam-do province. Meanwhile, the People Power Party presidential candidate Kim Moon-soo and independent candidate Han Duck-soo will meet one-on-one at 6 p.m. on Wednesday to discuss a possible merger. This comes as Kim abruptly halted his campaign on Tuesday after tensions escalated between him and the PPP leadership, as Kim wants to take time and lead the merger process, while the PPP leadership says there's no time with the official candidate registration coming up in less than a week. Kim has also accused the party leaders of trying to oust him as their presidential nominee.
If this was the plan all along, I don't understand why we held 3 rounds of primaries. So as of now, I'm suspending all my activities as the party's candidate. I will be heading back to Seoul to seriously address the pressing issues that remain.
Kim has kept himself away from the public since the announcement and avoided the PPP leadership's efforts to meet him in person. His camp also called for the court to step in as the PPP has announced a possible convention in the next few days, signaling that there could be another candidacy event to make Han Duck-soo the official candidate. As for the XPM, Han says a merger has been ordered by the citizens and it must happen. This came as he faced the foreign media on Wednesday, as he also said he will yield all decisions on the possible merger with the PPP. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korean officials remain optimistic about their planned nuclear power project with the Czech Republic, despite a recent court ruling that has halted the sealing of the deal initially set for this week. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has details.
The final signing of a multi-billion-dollar nuclear power plant contract between South Korea's Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power and the Czech utility company CZ has been put on hold. On Tuesday, a Czech court issued an injunction requested by France's EDF, a losing bidder, halting the deal. The court ruled that signing the contract before EDF's lawsuit is resolved could irreparably harm its chance of winning if the court later rules in its favor. Despite previous dismissals of EDF's complaints from the Czech competition regulator, the legal challenge forced the cancellation of the signing ceremony scheduled for Wednesday. In light of these developments, South Korea's Trade Minister An Duk-kun said at a press briefing in Prague on the same day that the government will do everything possible to ensure that the agreement is concluded promptly and smoothly. He maintained confidence that the issue would be resolved as the Czech Competition Authority has previously dismissed EDF's objections twice.
We are facing an unexpected delay, but there is no reason to doubt the transparency, fairness, or objectivity of the process.
That being said, he also said that it is yet unclear whether the delay will last for weeks or several months. KHNP President Hwang Kyo expressed disappointment and criticized what he described as protectionist behavior by established nuclear players in Europe. Deputy Prime Minister and Acting President Lee Jae-myung also addressed the matter in a separate briefing in Seoul on Wednesday. He stated that the South Korean government will maintain close communication with the Czech authorities to ensure the signing can take place as soon as possible. In response to this turn of events, the Czech authorities said the bidding was fair and that they still see no problem with the final deal with KHNP. Bilateral cooperation activities in Prague will proceed as previously planned, with both countries due to sign 12 memoranda of understanding in infrastructure and high-tech industries. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Also in the news, acting President Lee Jae-myung has spoken of a calm government response to U.S. tariffs with the so-called July package. At an economic meeting earlier on this Wednesday, he underscored the solemn nature of the situation and pledged a package deal before the 90-day pause expires. He added technical talks between Seoul and Washington would lay the groundwork for productive progress in bilateral negotiations led by the next Korean administration. Meanwhile, a high-level meeting with U.S. officials has been set for later this month on the margins of the APEC trade ministers meeting, with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer scheduled to visit Seoul next week. The South Korean currency gained ground against the U.S. dollar on this Wednesday, trading at 1,379 won in the early hours of its session today. This marks the won's strongest level against the greenback in 6 months and comes in light of expectations surrounding the planned tariff talks between the U.S. and China. Also, Asian currencies rallied as investors continued to withdraw money from the U.S. amid concerns of a possible recession. In what many observers are calling a dramatic escalation in tensions between two nuclear neighbors, India and Pakistan, they are trading fierce fire across their border, Pyongyang reports.
In the early hours of Wednesday, the Indian military launched a strike inside Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Pakistani officials report at least 30 civilian deaths, including children, and over 4 dozen injured. Coined Operation Sindoor, the strike targeted what India called terrorist infrastructure, with the Indian government stressing that no Pakistani military facilities were targeted. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif called the attack cowardly, and the Pakistani army spokesperson promised a strong response as well.
This cowardly, unjustified act of the enemy will be responded to strongly by the Pakistan army, responding with the support of the Pakistani nation.
Pakistan claims several Indian fighter jets were shot down in retaliation. India, meanwhile, reports at least 7 civilians were killed by Pakistani shelling across the de facto border that divides Kashmir between the two countries. The escalating military exchange follows weeks of rising hostility, notably the April 22nd terrorist attack in Indian-administered Kashmir that killed dozens, in which Pakistan has denied involvement. With both countries on high alert, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has urged the two nuclear powers to exercise restraint.
It is also essential, especially at this critical hour, to avoid a military confrontation that could easily spin out of control. Now is the time for maximum restraint and stepping back from the brink.
U.S. President Donald Trump called the operation a shame, while neighboring China expressed regret over India's actions and urged both sides to avoid further escalation. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
In other news, North Korea's Kim Jong-un will not be attending Russia's Victory Day celebration this week, but Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to do so. Our correspondent Kim Jong-shil covers the implications of this reality.
In the heart of Moscow, Russia is preparing for a highly symbolic Victory Day, marking 80 years since the end of World War II. But this year's event is unfolding under a different kind of pressure, the ongoing war in Ukraine. The commemorations run from May 8th to 11th, with the annual military parade set for Friday in Red Square. 29 world leaders are expected, and military units from 13 countries, including China, will join Russian troops in the parade. But one leader who won't be attending is North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Pyongyang is expected to send its ambassador in Moscow, Shin Hong-chul, in his place. Though the North has confirmed a support for Russian forces against Ukraine, its troops will not join the parade.
There was simply no realistic way for Kim to get there. North Korea has no aircraft for the trip, and going by train would take several days.
Another possible factor may involve Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is now confirmed to attend.
Given that President Xi Jinping is the most prominent guest at this year's event, it's possible that Kim Jong-un chose to stay away to avoid being overshadowed.
Professor Im added that Kim's absence may also reflect lingering tensions in North Korea's relationship with China. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping is stepping into the spotlight. His visit will include a summit with President Putin, expected to reaffirm the two countries' growing strategic partnership.
I'd like to highlight that Russia and China's comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction are now at the highest level in history.
Analysts say the summit is expected to focus on long-term economic ties and strategic coordination as both countries face growing pressure from the West. As China draws closer and North Korea pulls back, this year's Victory Day underscores a shifting power dynamic in Northeast Asia, less about history and more about strategy. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The Papal Conclave to choose the next pope begins on Wednesday at the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. 133 cardinals from 70 countries, the largest and most diverse gathering in history, will vote under strict secrecy. To be elected, a candidate must secure at least 89 votes, a two-thirds majority. The result of each vote will be revealed through smoke rising from the chapel's chimney, white for a new pope, black for no result. Pope Francis was elected in 2 days back in 2013. In other news, volunteering while traveling, pundits say, can be a rewarding experience if it's done properly. And this is what a recent group of guests to the Korean city of Andong sought to do. Our Park Gon-woo files this report.
Weeks have passed since the worst wildfire in South Korea's history mainly scorched Gyeongsangbuk-do province in the southeast part of the country in March. Over 99,000 hectares of land, roughly the size of 140,000 football fields, were affected. In hard-hit regions like Andong, signs of the disaster still remain, from charred trees on once-dense forest slopes to ruined homes, warehouses, and damaged cultural heritage sites. And with recovery still underway, tourist numbers have declined. But recently, change has been made thanks to volunteer tourists, visitors who come not just to travel, but to help. Wearing gloves and masks and fueled by sincerity, they're clearing away burned tree branches and gently cleaning cultural treasures using camellia oil amid thick dust.
I was scared when the wildfire happened, though my school wasn't very close. I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for people living nearby. That's why I came believing that small acts like ours can lead to big changes.
Burnt tree branches like this are scattered everywhere. Just clearing one away helps bring life back to this region. And especially in a place that's full of cultural heritage, such as Andong, you get to realize how much we almost lost. And that's why every small effort here truly matters. And the residents have taken notice.
The wildfire happened overnight. Everything just burned down, so it means a lot seeing these young people come all the way to this rural area to help us.
After lending a hand, participants also get a chance to explore the area's beauty and history.
I'd never had the chance to visit neat places like Manhyujong Pavilion before. Knowing it almost burned down made the visit even more meaningful.
To boost recovery, the government is also rolling out campaigns to encourage more visitors, offering travel discounts and support, along with more volunteer tours and programs. And with the help of these visitors, efforts are raising hopes to bring vitality back to fire-stricken regions. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News, Andong.
On the first Sunday of every May, an ancient ritual takes place at the Jongmyo Shrine here in Seoul in memory of the deceased monarchs of the Joseon dynasty. Our Lee was there this past weekend.
The king, carried in a royal palanquin, travels from the palace to Jongmyo Shrine. He's escorted by rows of officials and royal guards. When they reach the shrine, this impressive scene marks the beginning of a special reenactment, the Jongmyo Daeje, a grand royal ancestral ritual from the Joseon dynasty.
So the Jongmyo Daeje, it's a ceremony that honors the kings and queens of the Joseon dynasty, and it's an ordinary event. Recognized by UNESCO, it's a rare chance to see centuries-old royal traditions come to life.
The ceremony begins with placing the ancestral tablets, or shinju, of past kings and queens on the altar, followed by rites to greet and honor the spirits. With offerings of liquor, deep bows, and traditional music and dance, the ritual unfolds in solemn and precise tradition. This intangible cultural heritage was the Joseon dynasty's grandest and most significant state ritual conducted by the king. It was first revived in 1969 and is still held on the first Sunday of May and again in November. Originally built in the late 14th century, Jongmyo Shrine is recognized by UNESCO as the oldest and most well-preserved Confucian royal ancestral shrine. This year, for the first time in 6 years, the ritual at the main hall, Jeongjeon, was open to the public following 5 years of restoration work. In April, a Hwananje ceremony was held to mark the return of the ancestral tablets of the Joseon kings and queens to their original place in the main hall.
Since Jongmyo Daeje is a meaningful event held at a cultural heritage site, I wanted to wear a hanbok and chose a traditional one.
I left at 4 a.m. to attend this event today. I was happy to hear all the traditional music I was hoping for. It was a really special experience.
This was my first time seeing the Jongmyo Daeje, and even though I didn't know much about it, it made me want to learn more about traditional culture.
We took the chance and came to this palace to see what was going on and what it looks like, and it's very interesting, I have to say.
The timeless rituals of the 2-hour ceremony not only honor Korea's royal heritage, but also preserve a profound cultural legacy that still captivates and inspires today. Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Strawberries are among the key exports for farmers here, and their sales are looking very bright as a technique developed by a government agency ensures their freshness and flavor from local farms to foreign tables. Cha Eun-kyung explains.
Since 2021, the Rural Development Administration has used a controlled atmosphere technique to maintain strawberries' freshness for export markets. The technique does this and delays spoiling and decay by removing oxygen while increasing levels of other preservative gases. Introducing the CA technique allowed growers to increase their shipments and also use container ships for exports as opposed to just air transport. This saved distribution costs of up to 16 billion Korean won. The simultaneous complex management technique removes air from containers and introduces carbon and chlorine dioxides. The former gives strawberries a firmer texture, while the latter prevents mold infestation. This decreases decay of the strawberries by up to 20%.
We can deliver high-quality products, and we can send as much as we can, since the technique can maintain the freshness of the fruit.
The RDA spread the related technology to 16 export centers for strawberries as overseas shipments increased massively due to the introduction of the technology. The amount rose fivefold from 2007's 986 tons to 5,012 tons in 2024.
We received a great response from importers and consumers, with strawberries being sold out within 4 days at markets they are shipped to.
The RDA is continuing to integrate management models to systemize the exports of strawberries. Cha Eun-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In the Middle East, Israel has launched airstrikes on Yemen's capital Sana'a, targeting multiple sites, including the main airport, in retaliation for a recent missile attack by Houthi rebels near Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport on Sunday. On Tuesday local time, Israeli warplanes conducted a series of airstrikes on Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. The Israel Defense Forces reported that the operation fully disabled Sana'a International Airport. The strike also targeted power stations and a concrete factory believed to be used for military purposes. The airstrikes were a direct response to a ballistic missile launched by the Iranian-backed Houthi group, which landed near Israel's Ben Gurion airport on May 4th, the first time a Houthi missile had reached the vicinity of Israel's main international airport. The Israeli strikes resulted in at least 3 deaths and 35 others wounded. This marks the second straight day of Israeli airstrikes in Yemen, following previous attacks on the Red Sea port city of Hodeidah on Monday. In Germany, Friedrich Merz officially became the country's chancellor on May 6th after securing a majority in a second parliamentary vote following an unprecedented defeat in the first one. In the initial round, Merz fell short by 6 votes, marking the first such occurrence in post-war German history. In the second round of votes, Merz secured 325 out of 630 ballots, enabling him to lead a coalition government of his center-right Christian Democratic Union and the Christian Social Union Alliance and the center-left Social Democratic Party. Merz, who won an election in February, was then finally approved as chancellor by the Bundestag president. In the United States, the Supreme Court on Tuesday permitted the Trump administration to enforce its ban on transgender individuals serving in the military. The 6-3 decision, issued without a detailed explanation, lifted a lower court injunction that had blocked the policy that allowed the Department of Defense to discharge current transgender service members and deny enlistment to new applicants. This stems from President Donald Trump's executive order issued in January, asserting that gender identity differing from biological sex undermined military cohesion. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Unlike the cool morning, it was warm in the middle of the day with the sun shining under clear skies. In Seoul, the temperature rose to 20 degrees Celsius today, widening the daily temperature difference. You need to take good care of your health throughout this week amid these temperature swings. Tomorrow, early summer-like heat will appear with daily highs rising to 25 degrees in Seoul. In addition, the UV index will stay high in the morning and it will be very high in the afternoon. Please wear sunscreen before going outside. Tomorrow morning will be very similar to today with Seoul at 10 degrees, Gwangju and Daegu at 11 degrees. Highs will move up to at least 20 degrees across the country. On Friday, it will rain all over the country and the early summer heat will ease off a bit. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. Do stay with us and thank you for now.